Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Finlay, and in this video I'm going to go through the AQA GCSE Higher Writing paper, doing each of the 3 questions live in the hour and 15 minutes you get in the exam. On y va? So we're going to start with the translation because that's the first one on the paper, but also you kind of want to just get it out of the way so that you can spend all your time, or all the rest of your time, on the longer answers, so you don't feel kind of restricted by time for those. So I'd recommend you spend around 15 minutes on the translation, just because you don't want to rush it, because it is 10 marks and you can get all those 10 marks if you know the words. But you know, it's not the most valuable thing in the paper. You know, you want to spend the majority of your time on the 1950 word question. So when you're translating, a lot of the time you're not going to be doing something word by word. Okay, so for the first translation point, we are actually going to translate it word by word. But when we get to some of the others, I'll be able to explain a bit more about that. So, j'ai fait, I did. That's a pretty common thing. And then my science homework, you can't literally say my science homework, you have to say my homework of science. So mes devoirs de science. Just remember that science as a subject in French is plural. So you need to just remember that S there, on the end. And then yesterday, which is just hier. So, j'ai fait mes devoirs de sciences hier. Yeah, that's the first one. That's probably the easiest one. Now I got my friend normally goes to France for Christmas. Now, whether you want your friend to be masculine or feminine, it's still going to be mon ami with a mon. So even though mon is a masculine a pronoun, because ami starts with a vowel, even if you write it ami like this with an e to show that it's a woman or a girl, it's still mon ami because of the a. So mon ami, so instead of saying normally goes, you have to say goes normally. Yeah, it's just like you can't say je normalement vais, you have to say je vais normalement. So mon ami va normalement. And then to France is en France. So this is because for countries, you're either going to say au, like au, or en, depending on if it's masculine or feminine. And France is feminine, so it's going to be en. En France, and then Noël for Christmas, but you have to say le Noël because, I don't know, in French they just like saying le and la a lot more than we would say the. So pour le Noël. I'm not 100% sure if Noël has a capital letter. You wouldn't get, that wouldn't change your mark. No, it might not. They use capital letters a lot less in French than we do, but I think that might still have a capital letter. But even if it's not, it wouldn't change anything in terms of how you get marked. So this is one where you can't do a word-for-word translation, because if you were going to do a word-for-word translation, it would probably look something like I have, j'ai, just, juste, something like that. But I have just is a kind of set phrase in itself, and that is je viens de. So that's like I come from, or I'm coming from, which makes sense if you think about it, you know. I've just done this, I've just come from doing this. And then that's always followed by an infinitive. So je viens de jouer au foot, and then in the park, dans le parc. So the last bit of this translation sentence is a lot easier than the first, because what they're testing really is that I have just. So je viens de jouer au foot dans le parc. Yeah, that's a good one. Then when they were younger, you can't actually say, there's no word for younger. You have to say more young. So quand ils, it could be elle as well. It doesn't matter. I tend to just stick to the masculine because then you don't have to worry about changing the adjective endings or stuff like that. But actually on this one specifically, it doesn't make any difference. So été, just remember the ENT on the été. With été specifically, people often forget that. I think just because it's just a kind of a lot of vowels and a lot of silent, it just looks a bit weird. But yeah, you still have it. So quand ils étaient plus jeunes. So jeune, just remember you have that S at the end, because il is obviously plural. Quand ils étaient plus jeunes, now this used to phrase means you have to use the imparfait or the imperfect tense. Now if you don't know how to form that, there's a grammar video on this channel. I think the majority of people probably don't really learn how to form the imparfait for GCSE itself. It's more of an A-level thing. They do occasionally use it, but it's really not going to be more than like 1-2 marks in the entire, all the papers. But it's good to understand it mainly so you can recognize it. I'd only use it really if you have to, like in the longer word answers, unless you're really comfortable with the tense. I would just kind of stick to the passé composé. But still, for this, you are going to use the imperfect. So they used to watch is il regardait, with that, annoyingly long ending. Il regardait, then horror films is les films d'horreur. So like how with homework you can't say les séances devoirs, you can't say les horreurs films, you have to say les films d'horreur, films of horror. Quand ils étaient plus jeunes, when they were younger, ils regardaient les films d'horreur. Perfect. Then ma tante, so ma tante, it doesn't matter whether you, like what gender you are, it's about the gender of, well, the aunt, who is obviously going to be a woman. So that's going to be ma rather than mon. So ma tante, M, and then la malbouffe. I think there are a few other words for junk food. Yeah, that's just a word you need to know. That's an annoying one. I think I honestly might not have known it before the GCSE, and I was just lucky it didn't come up. But yeah, that's quite a specific one. But this is why you should just be practicing vocab all the time. We have an Anki deck on our website for all the GCSE specific vocab, because that is kind of, in my opinion, the best way of revising, just kind of getting really familiar with all the vocab. But yeah, la malbouffe, junk food. Mais ma mère, again, mère is always going to be ma, whether or not you, it's about the mother being a woman. Ma mère dit que c'est malsain. Unhealthy is malsain. Like how, yeah. Now, even though la malbouffe is feminine, because we've said c'est, malsain is going to be masculine. It's not going to be malsaine, which is the feminine one. It's not going to have an e on the end, because the c'est makes it masculine. And that always happens. So any adjective that's after c'est is always going to be masculine. Ma tante aime la malbouffe, mais ma mère dit que c'est malsain. Perfect. So we've done the translation. We'll check it again at the end, but I think for now we should move on to the 90-word question. So for the 90-word question, obviously there are two options. Usually I think there'll be like one, either that, you know, really like sticks out to you as, oh, I really want to do this one, or possibly more likely there'll be one bullet point that you kind of don't feel that comfortable with. So then obviously you choose the other one. But I think if they're both kind of equal, just do the first one, because then you don't have to spend any time, you know, trying to go like, oh, should I do this one, should I do this one? Like if both are equally good for you, just do the first one and then that's done with. So your opinion about festivals, this is obviously going to be in the present tense. So remember, for the 90-word question you need 3 time frames, past, present and future, not 3 tenses, because sometimes with people, especially who like really want a grade 9, they'll use the conditional tense, as they should, if you don't know how to use a conditional tense, which is like I would, so like je serai, like je serai, I would be, then make sure that you do. Yeah, it is quite an important tense to use. I think you can use it in pretty much any writing question, and it's something that really impresses the examiners, so yeah, I'd get used to that one. Those people, they want to use the conditional tense and then they think, oh, I've already used one tense, and then they'll use the future tense and think, okay, that's 2 tenses, and then they'll use the past tense and think, okay, I've already done 3 tenses. But the conditional tense is still kind of in the future time frame, so you've only really done 2 time frames, so you're going to miss out on quite a lot of marks because they need past, present and future. I mean, I feel like this is like you're guided by the bullet points, like your opinion about festivals, that's going to be present. A recent trip in your region, that's going to be past. What you do next weekend, that's going to be future. To do those 3 time frames, but still somehow, yeah, still people get that mixed up, so just have that in mind. Then the other one looks like it's kind of more travel themed, so like where you used to live, you know, talk about a place, your favourite place to travel abroad, again we're talking about a place. What you'll do to celebrate the end of your exams, that's obviously future tense, that's kind of slightly on a different theme. But yeah, I think these are all pretty easy. The future tense bullet points for both of these are both pretty vague, so you can kind of talk about anything, which is good. I think I'm going to go with the travel magazine. Oh, this is already highlighted. I did have it. Yeah, that's an accident. But anyway, so if you brainstorm some kind of stuff that we're going to do, because you want to plan before you do the answer. So we'll start with some, maybe some kind of general complex structures that we think might be able to use. So for where you used to live, you are going to talk about like the positives and negatives of that, because that way you can have opinions and justifications, and you can kind of like on one hand stuff like that, which the examiners all like. So d'une part, which is on one hand, and then d'autre part, which is on the other hand. I don't know why that's so low down. There we go. D'une part on the one hand, d'autre part on the other hand. You might have learned that as like d'un côté, de l'autre côté, all that kind of stuff falls under the same, they all have the same meaning on one hand and the other hand. Something else you might want to use, especially when you're talking about your favourite place, is like non seulement, mais aussi. So that's not only but also, because that's, you know, if you're going to talk about why you really like somewhere, then that's a good way to just put lots of more adjectives in, or more reasons, and then you can kind of, you know, expand your kind of range of vocab without having to come up with a completely new idea or a completely new sentence structure. I think for a justification, we're always going to want to say something like, we're going to use all of the, like, rather than just saying parce que, we're also going to say car. And then I also think something I quite using a lot is puisque, which means since. So instead of because, you can say since. Puisque has the same kind of meaning, really. Or étant donné que, which is given that. But it's, yeah, the étant donné que is probably the most sophisticated out of all of them. But I think if you just kind of alternate between the 3 first ones and then maybe have one étant donné que, then you'll have a really good range. And the examiner's like a range of vocab and stuff like that. I think we're probably good to start our answer now. So we'll start with where we used to live. I mean, we can just use a random place. I'm just going to say Paris because it's French and that seems fitting. So yeah, let's say that. Now I could say use the imparfait and say I used to live in Paris, but not everyone will know how to use that, so I'm going to try and avoid that. I mean, été, which is was, is still the imparfait, but that's obviously, you know how to use été. So I'm going to say when I was younger. I think if you try to avoid just starting every sentence with je, it means you're kind of forced to use more complex structures. So quand j'étais plus jeune, it's probably not the most natural way of saying it, but it is correct. Ma maison, my house, était à Paris. So earlier I was talking about how, you know, countries you'll say au or en. For cities you're always going to say à. So ma maison était à Paris. And then we're going to do the d'une part, d'autre part. D'une part, je l'ai. So that is like the le in there means it. So je l'ai aimé is something that I would use a lot, because I would learn how to use, because that's something you can use quite a lot in your writing. However, something has just occurred to me, which is I'm not 100% sure whether that would be masculine or feminine, because when you do add that it in, you have to start making the verb adjust. So for example, if it was definitely feminine, you'd have to say like je l'ai aimé, like that, which I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to avoid that, because if you have any ambiguity in the writing exam, you can always work your way around it, because there are plenty of complex structures that you can know how to use without, you know, being uncertain as to whether you're making a mistake. So d'une part, on the one hand, I can say j'ai beaucoup, so j'ai beaucoup aimé, rather than just saying j'ai aimé, j'ai beaucoup aimé les I want to talk about kind of the architecture and it being really pretty. Beaucoup aimé, I could just say j'ai beaucoup aimé l'architecture, architecture, or I could talk about j'ai beaucoup aimé les bâtiments. I might say j'ai beaucoup aimé les bâtiments et les monuments. I'm going to say les monuments, so like monuments, just kind of fancy buildings, stuff like that. J'ai beaucoup aimé les monuments et les bâtiments en général, or just j'ai beaucoup aimé les monuments et les bâtiments, or les shops, or les monuments et les magasins, parce que okay, we're talking about Paris. I'm going to say j'ai beaucoup aimé, I finally made my mind up, les musées, the museums, et les magasins, the shops. So j'ai beaucoup aimé les musées et les magasins parce que because I like parce qu'ils sont, I really liked the museums and the shops, because I might say because the buildings, parce que les bâtiments étaient, now remember, because bâtiment is plural, we need to have that ENT, étaient tellement, so that's a good one to use. That's like so, as in like they were so pretty, they were so beautiful. Étaient tellement beaux. So on the one hand, I really liked the museums and the shops because the buildings were so beautiful. It sounds a bit not quite as good as in English, does it? And then we're going to use like a however type thing. We could say cependant, that would work fine. But pourtant is possibly better. It doesn't matter either way, but pourtant is just slightly less common. So the examiner might just kind of go, okay, that's a more complex like scope of vocabulary. So pourtant, pourtant, d'autre part. However, on the other hand, j'ai absolument détesté. I absolutely hated. That's just, you know, the examiners like to see, it's not in the mark scheme specifically, but just this kind of personal engagement, which will make them kind of, you know, gravitate more towards your answer and stuff like that. But also just absolument is a good word, you know, instead of just saying très or beaucoup, you've got absolument. It's just adding to that kind of range of vocab throughout the answer. So j'ai absolument détesté. Does that have an accent? I'm not 100% sure. Okay, that doesn't actually matter because the only accent that matters is that final accent there. And that's just because the accents that really matter are the ones that change the meaning. So obviously without that accent, it wouldn't mean I hate it anymore. It would mean like I have absolutely hate. You know, it just wouldn't work. J'ai absolument détesté la circulation, the traffic. That's a good one. You can use that into anything when you're talking about the place. So I'd always learn the words circulation et embouteillage. So embouteillage is like a traffic jam. So j'ai absolument détesté la circulation. Given that, or since, we'll use given that. So, étant donné que, il y avait. So that means there were. Some people sometimes say il y était, which is wrong, because remember, it's not il y est, it's il y a. So, il y a becomes il y avait in the past tense, because a becomes avait in the past tense. Étant donné qu'il y avait tant de, which means so many, that's like tellement. You might want to learn tant de, so many. Tant d'embouteillage. Perfect. Bâtiment, oh, that has an accent on. That's not a particularly important one. Les bâtiments. Détester. The accent's really annoying me actually, and it has got an underlined thing, which obviously you wouldn't have in the exam. It doesn't make a difference, however, just for my personal thing. Okay, yeah, I think that's right. Pourtant, d'autre part, j'ai absolument détesté la circulation étant donné qu'il y avait tant d'embouteillages. Perfect. And then that can be your first paragraph for the first bullet point. It's a 90-word question. You don't need to write that much. We've already got in here, we've got some complex stuff. We've got quand j'étais plus jeune, j'ai beaucoup aimé les musées, d'une part, d'autre part, j'ai absolument détesté, étant donné que, we got il y avait, we got tant de, we got tellement. Yeah, we got everything in that. So let's move on to the second bullet point, my favourite place to travel abroad. We're just going to choose a random one. You could use a country or you could use a city. Let's choose a country, let's just say Italy. Rather than saying mon lieu préféré, which is like my favourite place, I'm going to use a complex structure and say ce que j'aime le plus. So that's what I like the most. And then c'est voyager en Italie. So if you don't know the ce que structure, you can say ce que j'aime c'est, so what I like is, ce que j'adore c'est, ce que je déteste c'est. If it's plural, you're going to say ce sont rather than c'est. And then I'm going to just follow that by voyage en Italie. What I like the most is travelling to Italy. Now, Italie is feminine anyway, so it would be en. But even if you're not sure whether it's masculine or feminine, because it starts with a vowel, that's a good one. You can say en. It's always going to be en because it starts with a vowel. So, ce que j'aime le plus, c'est voyager en Italie. You can say j'adore. J'adore, bit basic, but there isn't really much else we can say if you're going to say I love. But we can add a complex structure now, which is non seulement, which is not only, and then later we'll say mais aussi, but also. So j'adore non seulement la gastronomie italienne. So gastronomie is like, gastronomy, like the cuisine of a country or a place. So la gastronomie italienne, it's not going to be Italien because gastronomie is feminine, la. So it's going to be italienne. So j'adore non seulement la gastronomie italienne, or we can say something like especially. So surtout, that's, especially. That's a good word to remember. If you're struggling to remember it, you can think it's literally, there's like sur, on, all. So it's kind of a bit like above all, but it means especially, above all. Surtout les glaces, there we go. Especially ice creams. Mais aussi, I don't know, les paysages, that means landscapes. And then rather than just saying, les paysages, les beaux paysages, which is the beautiful landscapes, we can say like les paysages incroyables, the incredible landscapes. You don't need to write like you're going to write like you would write in English. You just want to be over the top, really dramatic, stuff like that, because that's how you get all the, good vocab, advanced vocab in there. Just remember incroyable because it's les paysages. We're going to make sure that's a plural S. So, ce que j'aime le plus, c'est voyager en Italie. J'adore non seulement la gastronomie italienne, surtout les glaces, mais aussi les paysages incroyables. So that, to be fair, that could be our bullet point. We're going to write a little bit more because you can, and as long as you're making sure you're not making mistakes, because obviously the more you write, the more likely you are to make a mistake, you can write a little bit more if you have time, which we do. Mais aussi les paysages incroyables. So I think we're going to go with something like, you can talk about how you go there every year or something like that, or how you went there recently. I think I'm going to say, this is a really good one. I went there is j'y suis allé. Now that "y" can mean, well, it can mean so many different things, but in this context it means there. So I think a good thing to learn, like a good phrase to learn, is j'y suis allé. J'y suis allé, I went there, or j'y vais, I go there. Rather than, learning the whole grammatical rule behind it, which you can if you want. That's a good just kind of stock set phrase to use, and the examiner will be like, wow, they've got an E. So j'y suis allé l'été dernier. Yes, I went there last summer. Oh, what can I say? And j'y suis allé l'été dernier, et you can say the trip changed my life. Le voyage a changé ma vie. Just remember, V there is feminine, so you can have ma. Whether it doesn't matter what gender you are, it's about the fact that V is feminine. J'y suis allé l'été dernier, et le voyage a changé ma vie. So we kind of switched. We got a little bit more past tense in there, which is good. It shows we're comfortable moving around tenses, stuff like that. You don't have to switch between tenses in a paragraph by any means, but yeah, I think that's a really strong paragraph. So what you will do to celebrate the end of your exams. So instead of going straight into what we're going to do, something I like to do is go into what we would have done if we had enough money. So we can say, si j'avais l'argent. So this means if I had the money. You can use this in any writing question without understanding why it makes sense, because it's the imparfait and stuff like that, and that seems to be coming up an awful lot today. But si j'avais l'argent, that is a stock phrase that I would say you should use, you should learn. Another one I like to say is si j'avais du temps, so if I had the time. Si j'avais de l'argent, si j'avais l'argent, they both work. So si j'avais l'argent, then we're going to use the conditional tense, which I do think you need to learn, and that's like, that's like I would, stuff like that. So si j'avais l'argent, we've said voyage quite a lot today, so I don't think I'm going to say that. We could say j'irai, I would go. Je mangerai. So that's I would eat à un restaurant, at a restaurant cher. So if I had the money, I would eat at an expensive restaurant. There we go. We've got the imparfait with si j'avais l'argent. We've got the conditional with je mangerai. That's the kind of thing you want. Restaurant cher. We may as well add a justification, because why not? Car j'adore la bonne nourriture. I love nourriture. Have I written that right? Nourriture. Sorry, I just realised I had autocorrect at the bottom of my computer. My whole perspective of French, I think I just realised I've been writing it wrong the entire time. Okay, there we go. It's not nourriture, it's nourriture apparently. I'll have a check for that and get back to you, and I'll make sure that is in If it's not nourriture, I'm going to make sure it's written in the thing so that you know exactly how that's written. That probably would have lost me a few marks. Enough to still get a 9, don't you worry. But yeah, be careful of that. I'm going to use, we've already used pourtant, so I'm going to use cependant this time. Cependant. What am I going to say now? Cependant. Je suis pauvre, I'm poor. I don't know what else to say. However, I'm going to say I have no money. Je n'ai aucun argent. However, I have no money. Je n'ai aucun argent. Ne aucun is quite a good phrase to learn. All those kind of negative stuff like ne aucun, ne rien, ne personne, ne que. Yeah, all good stuff to include. So cependant, je n'ai aucun argent. However, I have no money. Then we can talk about maybe like, however, I have no money, donc, so, je vais, however, cependant, je n'ai aucun argent, donc je vais célébrer, I will celebrate avec mes amis, dans une fête. So, however, it's probably so. If I had the money, I would eat at an expensive restaurant because I love good food. We've got a justification. We've got conditional stuff like that. Yeah, perfect. However, I have no money. I don't have any money. Then we got the ne aucun, complex phrase again. Donc, so, je vais célébrer avec mes amis dans une fête. In a party, or is it à une fête? Okay, if you're not 100% sure, again, avec mes amis chez eux, at their house. So eux is like them in this context. So je vais célébrer avec mes amis chez eux. Yeah, I think that's a perfect answer. There's no reason why that wouldn't get 15 out of 15. If I didn't know that nourriture was spelled that way, I would probably get 13, 14 out of 15. Like, it's not a big deal. But yeah, that goes to show that you don't need to like know every single complex phrase. And if you're a bit unsure about something, just find another way to say it. Unless you're unsure about every single complex phrase, in which case go for it, because they're lenient in the mark scheme for making errors when you're attempting a complex phrase. But if you know one that's right, like just go for that instead, you know? Yeah, so I think we can move on to the 150 word. So there are 2 here again. I always find the 150 words slightly harder because you only have 2 bullet points and you have to find more stuff to say about it, and sometimes the bullet points are a bit limited. So you're writing a blog for a teenage audience. The downsides of social media. There's probably quite a lot to say about that. The problem is I don't like when they talk about you're only allowed to say like the downsides or the negatives, or you know, you're only allowed to say the positives or stuff like that, because that means you can't do stuff like d'une part, d'autre part. You can't say like, yeah, I kind of think this and I also think this and I'm not really sure, which is kind of the easiest way to like write stuff in the long answer questions. So that's a bit of an annoying one. I often go for the one that doesn't have that if that's an option. And then what you do recently with your friends though, that is, you know, you can write about anything, literally anything there. Then the other one is exercise and social issues. Neither of these are as good as a 9 to word, I think. What would you do to stay healthy? That's probably a good one. I mean, it's annoying. But yeah, that's there's a lot to say there. And then the importance of giving to charity, they're really not nice with. The importance of giving to charity is an okay one, I think. However, even though I said I was going to avoid the downsides one, I think I will stick to the other one because there's often more to say about social media and what you did with your friends than there is about charity and stuff like that. I think the vocab is maybe slightly more limited there at GCSE level. So, downsides of social media is obviously going to be a present tense thing. So 150 words, remember you're only going to have 2 tenses, but you can probably find a way to bring in future as well. I mean, if it doesn't have future, you can probably find a way to bring in the other tense. Because the downsides of social media, you can talk about it and then you can say, I'm going to, I don't know, quit all my social media apps or something like that, you know. Or you can say, what I did recently with my friends, and then you can say, I'm going to do it again, you know. Now, the 150 word is where you're going to use even more complex language. We're going to talk about, you know, we've obviously got the stuff, all the stuff we used in the last one. But yeah, I think just use it more often, more of the conditional, more of the, not really the future sample because it's not a future tense one, but more of the si j'avais, stuff like that. Yeah, I think we're good. The downsides of social media. Okay, so I think a good way to start this might be with saying something like, you know, a lot of the time, so this is how you can get a wide range of ideas and vocabulary in, is kind of by, even though it only talks about the downsides in the question, you can talk about something like, even though, and then talk about the positives, and then you can like basically have half a paragraph about the positives, then you can go into the negatives. So même, oh, don't know why that's so far down. That's a bit annoying, isn't it? These text boxes are really annoying me. So the downsides of social media, as I was saying, même si, so that's even if, it's, so if you're talking about although, the word is bien que. So you could say like, bien qu'il y ait beaucoup de, stuff like that. The problem with bien que is that triggers the subjunctive, which you don't tend to learn at GCSE. You can learn it, and it's on our grammar video if you want to do that, but you don't have to. I didn't for GCSE. I'm pretty comfortable with it now. Like at A-Level, yeah. It's a weird thing to wrap your head around because there is technically a subjunctive in English, but we don't really use it and it's not really the same. So it's quite an annoying thing to wrap your head around. I would just avoid it. I would just use même si if you want to say bien que, because you use it in the same way and you don't have to do the subjunctive for this one, so it's much better. Même si... so même si... so social media is either les réseaux sociaux or les médias sociaux. So même si... let's just say les réseaux sociaux, les médias sociaux. Les médias sociaux. So remember, socio is plural with an X, just because social becomes socio with an X with plural, just because that kind of word is an irregular plural ending. So like stuff that ends in al, it's like how beau becomes beau with an X in plural rather than beau with an S. Yeah, it's one of those annoying ones. So même si les médias sociaux nous permettent, which is like allow us, nous permettent with ENT, always ENT. When you're doing something like it allows us to do this, it allows me to do this, it's often easy to forget what the verb ending is because, you know, les médias sociaux is so far behind in the sentence. But yeah, just always check that. Always go like when you're writing a verb, okay, what actually is the subject? So même si les médias sociaux nous permettent de rester en contact avec nos amis proches. So, même si les médias sociaux nous permettent de rester en contact avec nos amis proches, so that's like our close friends. So what's good about what we've already started is that we've used nous, even though we're not saying like nous, I don't know, like, and then a nous conjugation, like nous allons. We've used like nos, which is quite a kind of, you're not going to see many students using that at GCSE, which just means our, avec nos amis proches qui habitent or qui, nos amis proches que, let's just say nos amis proches. I can't really think about what to say, to be honest, so I was going to do something about like them living far away, but I think it's easier to just give another example. So, et parler avec nos familles, notre famille. I think I'm going to say nos familles because it's like our families. Nos familles. Then we're going to say il existe is a really good alternative to il y a, because especially with something when you're talking about the downsides of something, you're going to be saying il y a all the time and it's going to get really repetitive. So just having kind of other stuff is much better. So il existe, like there exist. Il existe beaucoup de, oh c'est pas that wrong, beaucoup de désavantages. Désavantages et de dangers. There are si quand on utilise cette technologie. So when we use this technology. Technologie. So même si les médias sociaux nous permettent de rester en contact avec nos amis proches et parler avec nos familles, il existe beaucoup de désavantages et de dangers quand on utilise cette technologie. This is really good because it's quite a complex sentence. Even in English, you probably get quite like, okay, that's a good one. Because we've got like, even though, and then we've got stuff like that, and we've got kind of a balanced argument here. They're going to really like that. That shows sophistication and stuff like that. Beaucoup de is something you just always need to keep in mind. So you never say, well, you can say, but it's a very specific meaning. So even though désavantage et danger are plural, you're not going to say beaucoup de. You have to say beaucoup de. Beaucoup de you would only ever use if you're saying something like a lot of the disadvantages, which is a lot rarer than there are a lot of disadvantages. You're never going to say there are a lot of the disadvantages. So it's beaucoup de. That's just something you always need to keep in mind as a rule because it's not really very intuitive when you're doing French. It's the same with something like, I know I talked earlier about tant de, which is so many. Again, that's not going to be tant de, it's tant de, beaucoup de, stuff like that. Quand on utilise cette technologie, I think we can start a new paragraph now. Quand on utilise technologie, new paragraph. What are a few dangers that we can think of? So there's stuff about, we can talk about le cyberharcèlement, which is like cyberbullying. We can talk about le piratage, which is hacking. We can talk about la dépression, which is depression, obviously. Is it? I'm not actually 100% sure. I don't think I made that word up. I think dépression is a word. But we can talk about les maladies mentales, so like mental illnesses and stuff like that, which come from technology. We can talk about loneliness, stuff like that. Yeah, there's loads of stuff to talk about. So let's talk about, what should we talk about first? Let's talk about cyberbullying. Okay, this is a really good phrase that you can use. So this is ce qui est. So ce qui est is like kind of what is. So what I'm gonna say, like, what the biggest problem is ce qui est le plus grand problème. Problème. So what the biggest problem is, ce qui est. That's a really good. You don't need to understand why, because it's quite complex. But yeah, I think if you can just shoehorn in ce qui est and then la chose la plus mauvaise or something like that. Ce qui est le plus grand problème, c'est, we can say, instead of saying c'est fine, we can say c'est peut-être, like is maybe. You know how, like, you know, when you're in English or something like that, you're always taught to use like tentative language, or like be like, it's kind of perhaps, it could be, stuff like that. You can do that in French too, and like it means you've got a wide range of vocabulary and you're speaking more sophisticated and stuff like that. C'est peut-être, le cyberharcèlement. And then we need to justify that, of course, because 150 words, you really need to justify your opinions if you want to get all those marks. C'est peut-être le cyberharcèlement, puisque, I haven't used puisque yet in the whole paper, puisqu'il, okay, so this is going to be quite a complex structure again. So pourrait is the conditional, it means could. I think you can use pourrait a lot. It could lead to. Just think logically about the words. Pourrait, lead to is like, well, you could say conduire à, but that's very sophisticated. I think even A-Level, that's quite sophisticated. That's like literally it kind of drives to, but it means mener. It means lead to, but slightly less sophisticated. Still very sophisticated, is mener à. That's to lead to. So mener à, puisque pourrait mener au problème mental, problème mental, or maladie, so mental illnesses, or maladie mentale, pourrait mener aux maladies mentales et au we could go really dark and talk about à la suicide, to suicide and stuff like that. Pourrait mener, yeah, let's just talk about, for now, aux maladies mentales. So we can talk about à cause de is a really good phrase. So, okay. You don't need accents on capital letters, but you can do it, so I quite like it for consistency, but my computer clearly doesn't want that. So à cause des médias sociaux, on peut toujours être, so one can always be, or like you can always be, on peut toujours être on peut toujours être connecté à, I'll explain all of this in a second, connecté à son connecté au harcèlement, or à l'intimidation. You can always be kind of connected. I think that's a really good way of phrasing it. I'm trying to say something like, because of social media, like you can always be connected to intimidation, or like always be connected to bullying or something like that. Okay, I think what's probably easier is to say something like, you can't escape. Let's do that. So, because of social media, on ne peut jamais, instead of saying on ne peut pas, fine, on ne peut jamais, you can never échapper à. That's escape from. Even though à is usually to, for some reason when you're talking about escaping, it's échapper à. That's just French being annoying. On ne peut jamais échapper à. Oh no, that's like escape to. No, it is escape from. It's escape from. I'm like 99% sure. Yeah, it's échapper à. On ne peut jamais échapper à l'intimidation parce que because yeah, on ne peut jamais échapper à l'intimidation. So that can just be a phrase, and then we can go on to explain it. So avant de is before, or just avant. Avant ces médias, so before these medias, like before these networks. Avant ces réseaux. Réseaux. Yeah, avant ces réseaux. L'intimidation. Trying to say était limité. Now remember l'intimidation. So words that end in sion are usually feminine, and l'intimidation is no exception. So l'intimidation était limitée à l'école ou au lieu similaire. So before these networks, the bullying was limited to school or to similar places. Sounds a bit weird in English, but it's perfectly grammatically fine in French, and the examiner will be very happy with this. Avant ces réseaux, l'intimidation était limitée à l'école ou aux lieux similaires. And then we can say pourtant again, maybe. So, pourtant, les médias sociaux permettent so that's allows. So permettre is quite a complex verb because you have to do allow à someone de do something. So, for example, permet aux mauvaises personnes, so it allows bad people de. So it's kind of the opposite of what you'd think. So it's like allow it. This is quite a complex. I think I might have made this a bit too complex myself. I'm gonna get back to this. I think sometimes with the 150 word questions, it's really easy to get carried away, which is what I've done, and you just have to not do it. Pourtant les médias sociaux. Okay. However, I've got a much better way. Okay. However, and then we're gonna do an étant donné que again. That's a good one. Étant donné que étant donné qu'on est toujours connecté, le harcèlement that has an accent, I think. Yeah, it does. Pourrait avoir lieu, which is like take place, or we can just say like pourrait toucher, affect everyone, pourrait toucher tout le monde. There we go. Yeah, so I've done that, which is something you should maybe try and avoid, is just I was making it really complex myself, and then it means you have to think more and stuff like that. If you feel that happening, just do what I did and just kind of just think and just try and make it as simple as possible, while still making sure you're including complex grammar and stuff like that, which we've already done with the ce qui est, we've done à cause de, we've done avant, we've got loads. To be completely honest, I think that's probably enough on social media. I feel I don't want to talk about that anymore. Yeah. I mean, there's probably a bit more to talk about. We should probably let's just do a quick en plus. En plus is a really good one. You should use that in speaking as well. Like, in addition, furthermore, perfect, beautiful connective. En plus, les médias sociaux pourraient oh, have I? Oh no, yeah. Mener à l'isolement parce qu'il est. I'm not really sure what I want to say with that actually. Could lead to isolation because like it's difficult to make plans. No. I'm just going to leave that there, to be honest. I think we can move on to the next bullet point now. We've done enough. We've done loads of complex sentences there. Now, obviously, you're not going to leave this blank space in the exam, but my text box have worked out really weirdly. So I'm just going to do that. What you did recently with your friends is so much easier. That is like literally the perfect question. Like, yeah, there's nothing I want to talk about more than that. I didn't mean to scroll down that far. Okay, let's go. Okay, so now for the second bullet point, there are loads of things we can say. We can talk about maybe, you know, traîner au parc, which is like hung out in the park. You could talk about, you know, aller au cinéma. It's like the most, everyone says that. However, you know, you're not going to get marked down for it. It's, if you forget something, it's something that's always there. You can talk about different sports that you've done. You can talk about music. You can talk about maybe je suis allé à un concert. Yeah, concert. You can talk about, you know, we played music together, something like that. I think we'll go along the lines of, we'll do 2 paragraphs. One maybe about, actually, so even though, I'm going to do actually aller au cinéma, because even though that is a really quite basic one, you have so much stuff to talk about there, because you can talk about the specific film, you can talk about what genre of film it was, you can talk about whether you liked it or not, why you liked it, why you didn't like it, all that kind of stuff, which is exactly what you want for the 95 question, especially when, as you probably saw, the first one can create quite a lot of problems. So yeah. Yes, let's go. So what did you do recently with your friends? We're just going to do a récemment because récemment, mais récemment, récemment, oh, it's récemment apparently. I didn't see that. Récemment, je suis allé au cinéma avec mes amis. Oh, that feels very... Okay, fine. Je suis allé au cinéma avec mes amis. Fine. Okay, that's fine. Je suis allé, just remember it's je suis allé, not j'ai allé. Because it just is Mrs. Van der Trump. It's one of those annoying verbs. Récemment, je suis allé au cinéma avec mes amis. Et on a regardé. We watched. You can say nous allons regarder as well. On is more natural. Nous is like very formal in French. If you're talking about nous allons regarder, like that's if you're talking to like the Prime Minister. You know, Prime Minister? Yeah, they have a Prime Minister. That's not for, you know, what is it? yeah, that you can use it, and then they'll probably actually be really happy that you've used it because it's very complex and stuff like that. But if you're just going to use on like that, it's completely fine. So récemment, je suis allé au cinéma avec mes amis et on a regardé un film d'horreur. Now, when you're talking about your friends, what's really cool is that you can talk about what your friends liked and what they didn't like. So we're going to use them d'une part, mon ami proche, my close friend, a détesté le film parce qu'il l'a trouvé. Okay, this is a really good phrase for you to use. So il l'a. So that is literally like the le is a bit like it. So he found it. Il l'a. Now because the film is masculine, it's just going to be trouvé like normal. Il l'a trouvé. Trop. Actually, we're not going to just go scary. We're going to say he found it quite boring. Yeah, he found it quite boring. Assez barbant. Assez barbant. He found it assez barbant. Barbant is not used that much by students, I don't think. They're more likely to use ennuyeux. So use barbant if you want to stand out. Il l'a trouvé assez barbant. Il a trouvé assez barbant. Cependant, d'autre part, however, j'ai beaucoup aimé, I think I've used that before in the 90 word, but I haven't used it in this one, so that's fine. J'ai beaucoup aimé le film puisque, you know, switching up a little. J'adore. I can just say I find horror films very agreeable. Je trouve les films d'horreur very, no, I'm going to say extrêmement. We want to be more you know, ambitious with our words like that, because that's what the examiners want. Extrêmement. Oh, I don't know what I want to say. Formidable, why not? It's just great. It's a kind of just generic, really good adjective, and it's not used that much. So yeah. Oh no, I'm going to say divertissant. That's much more, and that's entertaining. That fits much better, I think. Divertissant. And just remember to add that S in the end because it's a horror film. No, not because it's a horror film, because we're talking about multiple horror films. I find the films extrêmement divertissants. You also say like, je trouve divertissant les films d'horreur. That's actually probably more French. But that's quite complicated because it means it's a different sentence order to English, and then you're switching it up a bit. So yeah, this is perfectly fine grammatically and stuff like that. I think we probably need to just do one more paragraph and then we're done. So, divertissant. So now we can use en plus, because there's much more to say about this. En plus, j'ai joué with an accent, I don't know what I was doing there, au tennis. Or j'ai joué au foot, or j'ai joué au basket. Let's do basket, why not? J'ai joué au basket avec un ami cette semaine. Just cette semaine, it adds more of a time frame and that's useful. So I played basketball with my friend this week. This is a phrase that you can use just about anything really, anything singular. and that is ça m'a plu. You can just say ça m'a plu beaucoup or just ça m'a plu, and that literally just means I liked it. But it literally means it pleased me. In practice, it means I liked it. But it's just a, you know, how many times can you say j'ai beaucoup aimé? So ça m'a plu. J'ai joué à basket avec. Et ça m'a plu, but we need to have a justification always. Car. Okay, we can just do something generic. I like staying in good shape. Car. J'aime rester en bonne forme. You can say j'aime every now and again. Like, you don't need to change every single verb to get a grade 9. J'aime rester en bonne forme. Et mon ami was. Oh, why not? We can talk about the weather. J'aime rester en bonne forme. Et il faisait très beau dehors. Faisait très beau, or just faisait très beau. It was very good weather. J'ai joué le basket avec un ami. J'aime rester en bonne forme. Il faisait très beau. But we can say, of course, there's always going to be a but in these things. Like, nothing's ever perfect, nothing's ever extremely bad in these exams, because you always want to have other things you can say about it. Par contre, we've already said cependant, we've already said pourtant, that's the next one to go to, I think. Par contre, mon ami n'a pas aimé cette activité, didn't like this activity. Activité. Parce que je déteste le sport. Now, something my teacher actually taught me was OJ cat. I think OJ was like, it was like a picture of a cat drinking orange juice, and OJ was like orange juice. And that is opinions, justifications, complex tenses, adjectives, no, complex tenses, complex structures, adjectives, and tenses. Now, have we got opinions? Well, we've got ce qui est le plus grand problème, yes. We've got j'ai beaucoup aimé, we've got ça m'a plu. Okay, we've got opinions. Have we got justifications? We've got puisqu'il pourrait mener aux maladies mentales. We've got il l'a trouvé assez barbant. We've got j'ai beaucoup aimé le film. No, we've got je trouve les films d'horreur extrêmement divertissants. Have we got complex structures? We've got loads of complex structures. We've got même si, we've got ce qui est, we've got à cause de, we've got d'une part, d'autre part. Yeah, that's perfect. Have we got adjectives? I mean, yeah, we've got barbant, we've got divertissant, we've got, yeah, loads. And have we got tenses? Now, we don't need all 3 tenses for these, but we have definitely got, we've got past tense, we've got present tense, which is what the bullet point's asking for. So just make sure you have a quick read through your answers. I won't do that for you because you probably don't want to just see me rolling through my answers. But I think, especially with the translation, you want to just make sure you kind of can physically cross off every single word and link it to something that you translated. Even though not every single word has a direct translation, you know, I have just, you can just link all of that to je viens de, just because in the stress of the exam, you are so likely to make a mistake there, and you are so likely to miss something out. Just be careful, you know. We've still got a bit of extra time when I've been explaining everything I've been doing. Yeah, I think, just make sure you're doing all of that. Alors, that's all for this video. Subscribe to this channel for GCSE French videos, and go to astarlanguages.com/tutoring for one-to-one French lessons with us. Au revoir.